Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you tuning in today, we welcome you in. We've talked about UFOs and possible passengers in the UFOs before, or AEPs, or whatever you want to call it. Little green men. At least that's how science fiction likes to portray them. And I pretty much dismissed them because it doesn't make sense from a logistical standpoint. If you need to go to another system to mine, extract resources, do anything practical, it's not sensible to come into the inner solar system. There's plenty of rocks and moons and stuff like that beyond Uranus and beyond Neptune that offer everything that you may want. Water is in abundance, something we used to think was not possible. It's in abundance. Minerals. They keep announcing that they find an asteroid made of pure diamond, an asteroid made of pure gold, or at least a significantly high percentage. You could be puttering out there, not worrying about coming into the sun's gravity well, and grabbing everything that you want. Now, there will always be a sense of exploration, and some species are going to send probes out into the universe or actual ships where they're trying to figure out who's out there and what they're going to meet. But this is where we get into the difference in the types of aliens that we may encounter, and I think this is fascinating. The one I was thinking of would be aliens that evolved with a lot of solar flares going on. Transistors would be useless because an EMP would be going off with regularity. But you know what? We have the answer to that. Vacuum tubes. Yes, it's low tech. They're easy to manufacture though, and they can do pretty much anything a modern computer can, with the slight problem that they're kind of bulky. But you have to remember, we as human beings abandoned the technology because silicon is easier and cheaper to make. But can you imagine a society run off vacuum tubes? I mean, radios are no problem, even TVs, considering that the TV screen is one massive vacuum tube. But computers would still be the size of a room. Although maybe these aliens would be smart enough to reduce the vacuum tubes down. And while I don't think you'd get a home computer the same way that we know it, you might have a desk in your house hooked into some kind of internet, and you'd be able to do pretty much the same thing, depending on how good your programmers are. And yeah, programming is learned. You can make anything happen on programming. You can even have the vacuum net. And that would be more efficient for that alien species because these EMPs are going off constantly from solar flares. The survivability of a vacuum tube would be essential. It would also make their technology more valuable because you don't want to be replacing things constantly when they're big, they're expensive, and all the things you don't want to think about. It would be interesting to see what that species came up with because instead of buying a desk, maybe you'd buy a computer desk, which gives you a place to sit, assuming they sit the same way we do, and program away. Now, what if that species encountered us? Oh, look, they're using silicon. They're using transistors. We used to do that until we found out that a single flare from the solar system wipes it all out. That would be their perspective. We're going down the wrong technology tree. And we would say they are going down the wrong technology tree. They're both valid technologies. One's smaller and more vulnerable, the transistor. One's at least a little bit bigger, although I've seen vacuum tubes in all sizes. I don't really know what it would take to equal, say, the Commodore 64 in a with vacuum tube technology. All interesting thoughts, but that's just one possible species. We are still experimenting with the Hall drive. The the EM drive still has its supporters out there, and we're still in our infancy in discovering ways to get around the universe. Now, assuming something like the Alcubierre drive pays off and we actually do get to become an intergalactic species of some description, there may be species that are already well developed in that. But let's remember, the Alcubierre drive basically was a response to science fiction, specifically Star Trek and their warp drive. And Michael Alcubierre just sat down, worked out the math, and said, yes, it is possible. Requires some exotic matter, requires some of this, that, the other thing, but it's possible. And we're refining that formula to get it down to a point where it's within the scientific possibility of being tested. That's how science fiction dictates our culture. What about a utilitarian culture that has no use for that? Would they even dream of interstellar travel? Question is, the answer is probably, but would they imagine a system like we have? Science is universal, but the way you implement the science is completely different. How many cars are out there? All of them have different engines, different positives, different negatives. There are generalist mechanics, but generally speaking, you want to have the mechanic that knows how to work on a Honda, a Ford, etc., because they all have separate tools. And like I said, there's generalists and specifists. So even on our own planet, and include Tesla in there, and on our own planet, we have a difference in the type of technology. There's another answer to this as well. Steam. The first cars that were out there were made of steam. As a matter of fact, my great uncle owned one. Is there anything wrong with this? Well, they do put up a bit of pollution, but in the 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s, they didn't care about pollution. And from what I understand, once it warmed up, it was just as fast as any other car on the road. We're still discovering the basics of spaceflight. And like I said, imagine, as an analogy, that an alien race had gone with the steam engine instead of the internal combustion engine. You're dealing with a whole different set of parameters here, and that would be normal to them. We have to remember, while what we think we have is normal, we might be a distant outlier because either we decided a particular thing was not worth investing in, or we decided that we found the first way to do it and we were going to stick with that. Aliens would probably have a similar, how am I going to call it, utilitarian attitude. And it makes sense for them, depending on their situation, though. On Earth, again, we have a miracle planet here. It was set up, and I'm not invoking a creator here. I'm not invoking some sort of alien intervention. I'm just saying that's how planets form, and if there is a creator, he's the one that set up the way planets form. And we started off with, bitumen deposits. Bitumen is basically oil. They were on the surface. They're easy to get to. The Middle East had some. Southern Ontario used to have one in a town called Petrolia, and they still do produce a little bit of oil. But we found everything through meteoric iron, which seems to have been held in a place of honor. And then eventually we found our own iron and were able to forge it into steel. Now, I'm not going to go into factors like an alien that has learned to breathe CO2. I'm assuming they're in the Goldilocks zone. They're breathing the same things that we do. But what if those deposits are just too deep for them to get at, or they never discover it at all? The only things you have is meteoric iron. Um, Copper is, again, it's going to be deep down there. Aluminum, tin, those are simply not available. It would be very difficult to assemble a technological society. Might be possible, but we're pretty much looking at wood and rubber spacecraft. Rubber would be the heat shield, wood would be the structural integrity, and it is possible. We can make them watertight. We can make wood structures watertight. It would be possible to make them at least somewhat airtight. I don't want to be the one to test it, but it's possible. Again, we're looking at another species who may be very druid-like, and they're in touch with nature because nature gives us everything that we need, and in return we respect nature. Or they could be complete destructive people. It's like we bend nature to our will. But them running into one of our well, they wouldn't come into our space shuttles because they're all retired, so we'd know about it if it had happened. But we'd also be running two different technology levels. They'd have miters and joints and everything to keep their spacecraft together because it's a necessity. A necessity. What kind of drive would you be using in an alien spacecraft made out of wood? You could probably figure out some sort of organic drive that uses, stingrays and electric eels to naturally produce electricity. There's ways to do it. But in all these cases, we have different technology bases. All are valid in science and all are an adaptation to your environment. This is not even going into whether the aliens are hostile or cooperative. I think aliens would be cooperative because just as humans evolved from an omnivore that learned how to throw things and like carve spears and stuff like that, in order to get on any sort of technological basis, you need to have that cooperative structure. I can put rocket parts in the Amazon all I like. The tribes there are never going to use them to build a rocket. They're going to use them as heat shields, as ways to build houses and stuff, but it's outside of their experience to build a rocket. And that's no fault of intelligence. That's simply the world that they have. So, what have we not talked about yet? Language. Now, the problem that scientists delude themselves into is, mathematics is the universal language. I'll grant you that. You have to have math math actually doesn't matter. It's a human system for describing numbers. The number 10 has very little meaning to a child. And what if I give you the number G? G? Has Silverlight gone nuts? He's using letters instead of numbers. No, I'm using hexadecimal. That's base 16. And beyond 10, you need another placeholder, so you start using letters. What about aliens that have a different set of fingers? Even our own species doesn't universally use the decimal system. The Sumerians used base 60. And the best way to describe that, imagine counting on your fingers. And so, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you use your second hand, put your thumb up. That shows you've gone through 5. Then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Raise your second number up. You know you've gone through 10. Now that's a simplified way to explain it. It's actually a more advanced method for recording numbers. You can do up to 60 and you're still only using your two hands. Whereas we can only really do 10 and then we have to start doing crazy things. We're not smarter, they're not smarter, we're all human, but that's on our own planet. We have so much variation on our own planet that it's easy to say, oh, aliens are just going to be so different than us. But the same token, they still have to start with the same basic body plan. An area to think with, which we think of as the brain. Some sort of manipulators, our hands and arms, because to make technology work, you have to be able to, screw a screw in the hole, hammer and nail, whatever you're going to do. To make the hammer, etc., you need hands and a brain. You need some means of locomotion. That doesn't necessarily mean 2 legs. Could be 4 legs, although that's energy inefficient, and pretty much any creature would have evolved that out of themselves, but not necessarily all. It might be a great advantage in an environment that we don't really know about. So when we start talking about aliens and alien life, the number one truth is we don't know. The only thing we know is we know the body plans that actually work well on Earth. You can see the same basic body plan in a lizard, a crocodile, a cow, anything like that. 4 legs, a head, and a body. Tail optional. And all the, well, I'm going to assume it is easier to communicate with another species that is our same body style and has a similar way to think about things. I was about to say brain, but a similar way of thinking about things. Past that, you can put numbers back and forth all day, even if you both are on base 10. What if they have 12 fingers? What if they only have 8? These are all things that we don't know about. Now, it's not really hard to convert one number system to the other, but you have to recognize it before you can convert. And like I said, learning a language, the only place I can think of is you go into a McDonald's, I want a combo number 4. That's maybe the only time that you order by number. You go on Amazon, you don't click item number 157322. You click on the charger that you need for your batteries. We're going to learn a lot in the future. And a lot of it's going to come through pointing at things, which hopefully retains its same culture through, and saying, water, water. And then they say whatever it means in their language. It's going to come down to that. And we might not even have the ability, at least not at first, to truly communicate with them at all. What if they're like a dolphin and they use echolocation as well as spoken words? These are all the challenges. So I don't think aliens would be particularly interested in us. As a curiosity, maybe we have a piece of technology they don't. Again, just because you're 1,000 years advanced in poetry doesn't mean you're 1,000 years advanced technologically. Everybody has different knowledge as demonstrated across the planet in the various megaliths and the big lots of constructions like skylons, which seem to be everywhere. Skylons are not Cylons, they're a particular kind of tower. And a lot of cities have them. So with that, we hope you enjoyed this episode of the Silverlight Show. It is my intention to do more on this paranormal way out there thinking because it's what I really like to do. It's just tough to keep doing. There's only so many times you can talk about EVPs and astral projection and stuff like that. But it'll give me a sidetrack for a little bit and hopefully you all enjoy it. So share this video because sharing is caring. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. please click the notification icon so that way you can be notified every time there's a new show. And we hope you have a fantastic day.